anybody think that the book was silly? Did anybody notice that the buffalo was a little bit grumpy and was anybody here ever felt grumpy? Yeah. Yeah, me too. I felt grumpy. The one that has my train was late. I talked about it before, but I almost saw my foot that I was so grumpy. But I think one thing that Buffalo learns is that's totally okay. You can feel that way. You love other people, even when you feel grumpy and Buffalo. And one thing that's so nice about this big kissy crow picture at the end is when he was kind to his friends, they were kind right back. They accepted him for who he was, even though he was afraid to show it to them. That's why I'm very proud of Buffalo. And I also think it's awesome. Does anybody have any questions for me? Moms and dad, grown-ups too. Oh yes.
Did you enjoy writing as a kid?
I loved writing and I loved reading. It all came from reading and from. I was so lucky to be around so many children's books and have an independent bookstore in my neighborhood where I grew up. And so I really loved reading and escaping into books. And the more and more I read, the more I realized I could write. But it all comes from being inspired by other people's writing, by being inspired by books that exist in stores like this one upstairs. Yeah. Yes, what's your question? I made, okay, well, when I was in elementary school, I made about a book a year. So in my first grade, I think I made 3 books, and they were all about my grandma. And then when I was a grown up, I made one book about my grandma. Here. But yeah, I made books in school. It doesn't, you're not just an author when a fancy publisher and a fancy bookstore decides to sell your books. You're an author as soon as you have a story and as soon as you share it with other people. So yeah, I wrote books ever since I could write because I like sharing the stories that I wrote. And I had teachers who encouraged me to do that. How many books have you written? Yeah, well, have you written stories before in school? Okay, maybe one day. Yeah, if you want. It's up to you. Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that you were school that does that. Wonderful. Oh, yes. What's your question? That's great. Sometimes one of the reasons when I wrote this book is I wanted a book that as a mama would be very fun to read. And I'm so glad that you're one that thinks that too. I'm glad I read it. Yeah. I hope you enjoy listening to it. You did. Yes. Oh yeah, I really I can't accept thanks on it, but yes, I agree. So who here thinks that these illustrations were made with paint? Who thinks with pen and who thinks of pen and ink? And who thinks that she made them with wood? Well, all of you were right. Every single person is right. You're right too. But the first thing that Erin found is a woodblock from British Columbia. And the publisher put me in touch or gave me a list of a lot of different artists. And I saw her drawing. She did one of the raccoons. What is this? And she basically makes stamps out of wood. She carves them. She stamps them into ink. And then she scanned that stamp into a computer and they would colorize it and make it all these beautiful colors that you see in the book. So every single creature, the prairie dog, the ram, every tiny detail was once a piece of wood that Erin Cron, the brilliant illustrator, carved. So writing a children's book is part writing, and the other half of it is art. So sometimes you can tell stories with words, and sometimes you can tell them with pictures. This is a book that puts them both together. Yes. What is your question? That's a great question. This sounds like the type of question that my kid asks. Yeah, that's a good logical question. So I think he wasn't dry yet. Has anybody ever given their dog or cat a bath or seen a picture of a wet dog or a wet yep. And have anybody here ever gotten their hair shampooed in the bath? Yeah, me too. When I was little, did you notice that your hair looks different when it's wet? versus when it's dry. So he got small because he got all wet. And when he dries, he'll be puffy again. I do think Buffalo goes back to being super puffy, but I hope, and I like to think, knowing him, that the lesson that he learned when his friends saw who he really was, which was just a little guy who they loved, and they loved him anyway, that he doesn't go back to acting all grumbly and tough. He is kind to them.